What do you think of this intelligent design theory? Because the reason why I bring him up as an example is because it seems to be catching fire with some pretty intelligent people.
Yeah, but not with biologists.
Yeah, it's bunk.
I mean, it's catching fire with a lot of intelligent people, but the intelligent people almost universally, except for a couple of exceptions like Behe and Dembski, are like lawyers. And you know, people who have political motivations. If you take a look at the breakdown of scientists, you'll find that almost none of them who have experience in relevant fields actually buy intelligent design theory in any way.
Yeah. The people who are promoting intelligent design, the reason that we're hearing about it, and you say that, you know, it's kind of catching winds, I guess.
What did Anthony Flew do? Does it say?
I don't know.
I mean, was he just a guy who made videos? And if so, what relevance is his opinion?
A British philosopher and
philosophy professor.
Yeah.
So a philosophy professor says there's no way for biologists to explain the origin of life when biologists apparently disagree.
Yeah.
Well, but if you're going back to the first cause, I mean, you're not just discussing issues like evolution. I mean, you can actually have a discussion about the origins of the universe without having to discuss necessarily the origin of life, you know, on this planet. I mean, you can have a first cause. I mean, I think, you know, for we who are not scientists, I think it's pretty compelling.
And I'm going to put
the idea that if you look at something like a house that's there and it's complex, and you stumble on it, and you
how
might not
complex
like it because
is
it's logic, but you know, and you come upon that, you think to yourself that perhaps there was a designer. Perhaps it was built
would you say that God is simple or complex?
Well, I mean, I think I'm simple, so my understanding is probably.
So you're simple, then you don't need a designer. No problem.
Well, so I guess
you're not complex.
The atheists are extremely complex, and so they don't need one, and I don't understand. I mean,
well, you say that things that are complex must be designed, right?
I don't say they must be, but I say that I think
then.
Well, then there's no argument.
Well, I think it's more likely that if something is complex and it represents something.
Likely has nothing to do with it. There's no evidence that God exists.
We're all talking. I mean, atheists, you can't prove a negative, right? You can't prove that there's not a God. No one can prove a negative.
Yeah, but that's not our job.
I mean, all we're talking about is whether it's more and less likely, right?
Yeah, but that's not our job. The theists are out there saying...
It's not my job to prove it absolutely either, is it?
Well
then... we're talking about what is more and less likely.
It's a theist proposition that there is some, you know, big being out there who created everything.
Do you believe...
They're the ones who have to prove that.
Do you believe that there has to be a God, or that there might not be?
Now you are sounding like a lawyer. I mean, as opposed... Well, I mean, you just talking about how lawyers, you know, don't tend to think like scientists.
Is it not logical?
I didn't say that to denigrate lawyers. I know some very nice lawyers, but I wouldn't rely on a lawyer to tell me how science works.
Exactly, right. Or biologists.
And I don't think that you necessarily have to be a scientist or use scientific arguments to discuss something like first cause, and that's why I say you can't prove a negative, because it does get into philosophy and logic and those sorts of things. Because if you're talking about whether or not there's a first cause, you are talking about probability. You're talking about theory. You're
not necessarily. Let's hold on here for a second. Okay. Anthony Flew basically said that life is so complicated, I don't understand how it could have possibly come about by chance or natural processes and such. Therefore, it must have been God or some kind of higher intelligence. Just because you don't know how it was done doesn't mean that it wasn't. I don't know exactly every detail of how electricity works, but I can still go over to the light switch and turn it on and it works. I don't have to say, since I can't possibly understand how it all works, it must be God. Somebody out there does. Now, we might extend that and say, we have not figured out how the universe started or what caused the first, reproducing life system. We don't know that for sure. We have some theories out there, but no solid evidence saying this is the way that it happened. Just because you don't know doesn't mean that you can say God did it, because that answers absolutely nothing. It just gives you a whole nother level to push us back and say, well, where did God come from? How come he gets to be the way out that just happens to be, when your life, well, that can't be that. That can't have just happened by chance. God, that can do it. Life can't.
Right, and if the matter in the universe is so complicated that it must need a designer, then how come we can make up an omniscient, omnipotent being who listens to 6 billion people's prayers and issues and does like micromanaging stuff, like help people find their lost car keys when they pray, but he doesn't need a designer? Isn't that pretty complicated?
Well, I think that's a problem for any theory about the origins.
Yeah, but it's a bigger problem. It's a bigger problem for theists, because it's an even bigger problem for theists than non-theists, because now you're making up something that we've never seen or touched, or or had any kind of evidence for of any sort. Creating this thing in your mind that is more complicated than all the other stuff in the universe put together, and then saying, well, that just is.
I don't think it's any more difficult than finding a baby, for instance, and assuming that there's a parent behind it, and let's say you knew nothing about it.
Okay, so then where did God come from?
I don't know.
Yeah, the baby has a parent, we know.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure, but I mean, it's possible. I mean, you were talking about the Mormons earlier. They're polytheists. They believe that there was a God, and then there was a God before that. And
basically, there is zilch evidence.
It's just as difficult to conceive of an infinite source going back and having some scientific explanation. It's just as difficult to grasp that as a human being.
Okay, so let's add on top of that a layer of complexity. Yeah, so let's add on top of
it is to grasp the idea of a first creator.
Okay.
I don't understand
why.
So
you're saying that it's really impossible to say that random chance and things like that could have produced the universe. Therefore, there must have been a God. Well,
those had to have an origin as well, too, right? So I mean, even if you're talking about let's say the first atom or subatomic particle or whatever,
we don't know. We're looking into it.
Well,
but there is zero evidence. There is zero evidence for any kind of a God. Period. Full stop. No evidence whatsoever. And we have evidence of science. We know how science works. We don't know how the universe started, but we've got some pretty good ideas. Why do we have to posit something which we have absolutely no evidence for and say that did it, when we can just say we've got some theories that are kind of being worked out right now that look like they might be on the right trail? Let's follow those, rather than say, dump all that stuff. It must have been this thing, which we've never seen before, never heard of, have no evidence for, no consciousness of, but hey, it must have did it.
I'll say one last thing. I'll let you guys go ahead and move on to a friendlier call. But you do say that No, I really do enjoy your show, and I think you guys are quite intelligent and quite knowledgeable. But I would say that I've heard you say a number of times there's no evidence, no evidence, no evidence. I mean, you might not like the evidence, but it does constitute evidence. I mean, the reason why I bring up the intelligent design theory is that a lot of people believe that a lot of what we're discovering and the origins of mapping the human genome, the intelligence of life, the anti-entropic nature of life.
Biologists typically
the Bible
agree
even
with
as evidence. You might not think it's good evidence, but it is evidence.
Well, the evidence is fine. We dispute what you think the evidence points to.
Okay,
I mean, what you say it's evidence
for.
We're going
back to what's probability, right? We talk about whether it's more probable.
But you never address the probability that there could be a God. I mean, the probability that some infinitely complex and super intelligent being could just happen to exist without any cause.